Discovering the World on Foot. 12 extraordinary walking experiences that reveal hidden stories. In an era of rapid transit and instant gratification, the simple act of walking through a city has become a revolutionary way to travel. While tour buses whisk passengers past landmarks at breakneck speed and subway systems tunnel beneath the very stories that define a place, walking tours offer something increasingly rare in modern travel: the opportunity to truly inhabit a destination rather than merely observe it. These carefully crafted pedestrian journeys transform tourists into temporary locals, revealing layers of history, culture, and human experience that can only be discovered at the pace of footsteps. The art of the walking tour extends far beyond mere sightseeing. These experiences serve as bridges between past and present, connecting contemporary travelers with the ghosts of history, the pulse of local life, and the authentic rhythms that define each unique place. From underground passages that hide forgotten chapters of urban development to vibrant neighborhoods where street art tells stories of transformation and hope, walking tours provide intimate access to the soul of a destination. Subterranean Secrets. Seattle's underground adventure. Deep beneath the bustling streets of modern Seattle lies a hidden world that most visitors never suspect exists. The Seattle Underground Tour offers an extraordinary journey through the buried remains of the original city, a labyrinthine network of storefronts, sidewalks, and passages that tell one of America's most remarkable urban survival stories. Following the devastating Great Seattle Fire of 1889, which consumed 31 blocks of the downtown core, city planners faced a monumental decision that would literally reshape the urban landscape. Rather than clearing away the charred debris and starting fresh, Seattle's determined residents chose an audacious path forward. They began construction of a new city directly above the ruins, creating what amounts to a three-dimensional timeline of urban development. Today's visitors descend into this preserved underworld through discreet entrances in Pioneer Square, emerging into a twilight realm where original storefronts still display their painted signs and wooden sidewalks stretch into shadows that have remained undisturbed for over a century. The underground tour guides weave together tales of the colorful characters who inhabited this buried city during its heyday, including stories of the entrepreneurial women who operated businesses in the underground passages during Prohibition. These subterranean corridors once bustled with legitimate commerce and illicit activities alike, creating a parallel economy that operated literally beneath the surface of respectable society. Visitors walk through spaces where saloons, shops, and even hotels once served customers who descended from street level into this hidden commercial district. The technical aspects of Seattle's reconstruction become fascinating when experienced firsthand. Original ground floor windows now serve as skylights for the underground passages, while what were once second-story entrances became the new street-level doorways. This engineering marvel created a city with two distinct levels, each with its own character and purpose. The underground tour reveals how practical necessity led to one of the most unique urban landscapes in North America, where visitors can literally walk through different eras of the same city. Artistic Revolution. Medellín's Comuna 13 Renaissance. Few walking tours offer as powerful a testament to human resilience and creativity as the journey through Comuna 13 in Medellín, Colombia. This hillside neighborhood, once synonymous with violence and despair, has undergone one of Latin America's most remarkable urban transformations, evolving into a vibrant canvas where art, community organizing, and innovative infrastructure have combined to create hope from hardship. The physical challenge of navigating Comuna 13's steep terrain becomes part of the experience, as visitors climb alongside residents using the neighborhood's famous electric escalators, the first outdoor escalator system installed in a Colombian slum. These moving staircases, which reduce a 35-minute uphill climb to just 6 minutes, represent more than mere transportation infrastructure. They symbolize the city's commitment to connecting marginalized communities with economic opportunities and social services previously beyond their reach. Every surface in Comuna 13 tells a story through elaborate murals that cover buildings from foundation to rooftop. Local artists, many of whom lived through the neighborhood's darkest periods, have transformed walls that once bore bullet holes into galleries that celebrate culture, memory, and possibility. The walking tour guides, often residents who experience the neighborhood's transformation firsthand, provide context that no external observer could offer. They explain how specific murals commemorate lost friends, celebrate cultural traditions, or advocate for continued peace and development. The tour reveals how creative expression became a tool for social change in Comuna 13, Hip-hop culture, introduced by young residents who found inspiration in American rap music, provided a platform for addressing social issues through lyrics and performance. Today, impromptu rap battles and breakdancing demonstrations occur naturally during tours, as local artists share their craft with visitors who have come to understand their story. The neighborhood's transformation demonstrates how art, when combined with community organizing and strategic investment, can literally paint over a legacy of violence with visions of hope. Culinary heritage. Nassau's flavor journey. The walking food tour through historic Nassau provides an immersive exploration of Bahamian culture through its most accessible and delicious medium, local cuisine. This gastronomic adventure reveals how the island's complex history of indigenous peoples, European colonization, African diaspora, and Caribbean commerce has created a unique culinary fusion that reflects centuries of cultural exchange and adaptation. Each stop on the Nassau food tour tells a specific chapter of Bahamian history through taste. Local guides explain how traditional dishes like crack conch developed from the practical need to tenderize the tough mollusk meat, while also revealing the West African influences in seasoning techniques and preparation methods. The tour visits family-owned establishments where recipes have been passed down through generations, providing authentic tastes that connect contemporary visitors with historical foodways. The beverage component of the tour introduces participants to drinks that reflect the island's agricultural heritage and cultural exchanges. Switcher, the traditional Bahamian lemonade, demonstrates how local lime cultivation combined with imported sugar to create refreshing drinks suited to the tropical climate. Local rum tastings reveal how Caribbean distilling traditions developed from sugarcane cultivation, while also introducing visitors to contemporary Bahamian distilleries that maintain traditional methods while experimenting with innovative techniques. The tour guides share stories of how different immigrant communities contributed to Nassau's culinary landscape. Greek sponge divers who settled in the Bahamas in the early 20th century brought Mediterranean influences that still appear in local preparations, while Haitian and Cuban immigrants added their own spice blends and cooking techniques. This cultural fusion creates a dining experience that reflects the broader Caribbean experience of adaptation, creativity, and cultural preservation through food traditions. Victorian mysteries. London's dark historical walk. London's Jack the Ripper walking tour transforms the city's East End into a living museum of Victorian crime and social history. These evening expeditions through Whitechapel's narrow streets and shadowy alleys provide participants with an immersive experience of 1888 London, when one of history's most notorious serial killers stalked the fog-shrouded streets of the impoverished district. The tour guides, often historians specializing in Victorian crime, provide detailed context about the social conditions that made the Ripper murders possible. Participants learn about the extreme poverty that drove women to prostitution, the overcrowded lodging houses where victims lived, and the inadequate police resources available to investigate crimes in London's most neglected neighborhoods. The walking tour reveals how the murders exposed the stark inequalities of Victorian society, forcing comfortable middle-class Londoners to confront the desperate conditions existing just blocks from their affluent neighborhoods. Each stop on the Ripper tour corresponds to actual crime scenes, with guides providing forensic details about the murders, while also discussing the various theories that have emerged over more than a century of investigation. The tour explores how the case became one of the first modern media sensations, with newspapers sensationalizing the crimes and creating the mythic figure of Jack the Ripper that continues to fascinate contemporary audiences. The experience extends beyond mere crime tourism by examining how the Ripper case influenced police procedures, forensic science development, and criminal profiling techniques. Guides discuss how the investigation introduced photography to crime scene documentation and how the case contributed to reforms in police training and procedure. The tour ultimately reveals how this series of brutal crimes catalyzed significant changes in both law enforcement and social policy in late Victorian Britain. Social perspective. Prague's alternative narratives. Prague's social walking tours, conducted by guides with lived experience of homelessness, offer visitors an entirely different perspective on one of Europe's most beautiful cities. These tours challenge conventional tourism by revealing the hidden struggles and survival strategies of Prague's most marginalized residents, while also highlighting the resilience and resourcefulness of people often invisible to typical visitors. The guides share personal stories of life on Prague's streets, explaining where homeless individuals find shelter during harsh winters, how they access basic services, and what daily survival looks like in a city increasingly oriented toward tourism and gentrification. These tours visit locations that most visitors would pass without a second glance, park benches designed to prevent sleeping, public bathrooms that serve as important hygiene resources, and charity kitchens that provide essential meals for people without homes. Beyond homelessness, these alternative tours reveal other hidden aspects of Prague's social landscape. Guides discuss how the transition from communist rule to capitalism created new forms of inequality and displacement, affecting not only homeless individuals, but also elderly residents on fixed incomes and families unable to afford rising rents in the city centre. The tours provide context for understanding how tourism development, while bringing economic benefits, can also contribute to social displacement and housing insecurity. The educational component of these tours extends to explaining Czech social services, discussing how different European countries approach homelessness and poverty, and revealing the specific challenges faced by marginalized communities in post-communist societies. Participants gain insights into social issues that affect cities worldwide, while also contributing financially to organizations that provide services to Prague's homeless population. Pop culture immersion, Tokyo's otaku universe. The guided exploration of Tokyo's Akihabara district provides visitors with an intensive introduction to Japanese pop culture phenomena that have influenced entertainment worldwide. This walking tour through the electronics and anime capital of Japan reveals how subcultures centered around manga, anime, video games, and technology have evolved from niche interests into global cultural exports. The tour begins with historical context about Akihabara's development from a post-war electronics market into the world's premier destination for pop culture enthusiasts. Guides explain how the district's concentration of electronics shops attracted early computer hobbyists and video game enthusiasts, creating a community of technical experts and entertainment consumers that eventually evolved into contemporary otaku culture. Participants visit multi-story buildings dedicated entirely to specific aspects of Japanese pop culture, from stores specializing in vintage video games to shops selling handmade collectibles based on obscure anime series. The tour guides, often passionate participants in otaku culture themselves, explain the significance of different cultural phenomena and how specific anime series or video game franchises have influenced broader Japanese society and international entertainment. The experience includes visits to themed cafes where staff dress as anime characters, arcade centers featuring games unavailable elsewhere in the world, and stores selling everything from professional quality cosplay costumes to rare collectible figures. Guides discuss how these businesses cater to both serious collectors and curious tourists, while also explaining the social aspects of otaku culture, including conventions, fan communities, and the creative industries that support this vibrant subculture. Cultural heritage, Cape Town's Bo-Kaap discovery. The Bo-Kaap Heritage Walk through Cape Town's most colourful neighbourhood provides visitors with an essential introduction to South African cultural diversity and the complex history of racial classification under apartheid. This guided tour through the steep streets lined with brightly painted houses reveals stories of resistance, preservation, and cultural pride that define one of Cape Town's most significant historical districts. The tour begins with explanations of the neighbourhood's origins as a settlement for freed slaves and political prisoners brought to the Cape Colony from Malaysia, Indonesia, and other parts of the Dutch colonial empire. Guides describe how these diverse communities, collectively known as Cape Malays, developed a unique cultural synthesis that combined Islamic religious practices with local adaptations and influences from their various homelands. The famous colourful houses that make Bo-Kaap one of the world's most photographed neighbourhoods represent more than mere aesthetic choices. Tour guides explain how the bright colours emerged as expressions of cultural identity and resistance against apartheid-era restrictions that sought to limit where different racial groups could live and how they could express their cultural heritage. The painting of houses in vibrant blues, greens, yellows, and pinks became a form of claiming space and asserting cultural pride in the face of systematic oppression. The culinary component of the Bo-Kaap tour introduces participants to Cape Malay cuisine, which reflects the neighbourhood's complex cultural heritage through dishes that combine Indonesian spice blends with local ingredients and cooking techniques developed over centuries of adaptation. Local restaurants and family homes provide opportunities to taste traditional foods while learning about how recipes served as vehicles for cultural preservation and transmission across generations. Spiritual exploration, New Orleans cemetery traditions. The guided cemetery tours in New Orleans provide visitors with insights into the city's unique burial traditions, spiritual practices, and cultural fusion that defines the Crescent City's relationship with death and memory. These walks through historic cemeteries reveal how geography, climate, cultural diversity, and spiritual beliefs have combined to create burial practices found nowhere else in America. The practical aspects of New Orleans cemetery design emerge from the city's challenging geography. Built largely below sea level in a subtropical climate with a high water table, New Orleans could not employ traditional underground burial practices used elsewhere in North America. The solution, borrowed from Mediterranean and Caribbean traditions, involved constructing elaborate above-ground tombs that function as permanent burial sites while accommodating multiple family members over time. Cemetery tour guides explain the complex spiritual traditions that influence New Orleans burial practices, including Catholic rituals, West African spiritual practices, and Creole folk beliefs that developed through centuries of cultural exchange. The famous tomb of Marie Laveau, the legendary Voodoo queen, serves as a focal point for discussions about how African spiritual traditions adapted to North American contexts and how folk beliefs continue to influence contemporary New Orleans culture. The architectural significance of New Orleans cemeteries becomes apparent through guided examination of elaborate tomb designs that reflect different cultural influences, economic status, and historical periods. Guides point out examples of French colonial, Spanish colonial, Creole, and Victorian architectural elements, explaining how cemetery design reflected the broader cultural evolution of New Orleans society. Indigenous wisdom. Melbourne's Aboriginal heritage experience. The Aboriginal Heritage Walk through Melbourne's Royal Botanic Gardens provides visitors with profound insights into Australia's oldest continuous culture through guided exploration of native plants, traditional knowledge systems, and contemporary Indigenous perspectives on environmental stewardship. This walking tour, led by Aboriginal guides, offers education that extends far beyond botanical identification to encompass philosophical approaches to land management and cultural preservation. The tour begins with traditional welcome to country ceremonies that acknowledge the Kulin Nation peoples as the original inhabitants of the Melbourne area. Guides explain the significance of these protocols in contemporary Australian society and how recognition of Indigenous land rights and cultural practices has evolved in recent decades. Participants learn about the complex kinship systems and territorial boundaries that governed Aboriginal societies for thousands of years before European colonisation. The botanical component of the tour reveals how Indigenous Australians developed sophisticated understanding of plant properties, seasonal cycles, and ecological relationships that sustained complex societies without agricultural technology. Guides demonstrate traditional uses for various native plants, from medicinal applications to food preparation techniques, while explaining how this knowledge was transmitted across generations through storytelling, ceremony, and practical education. The cultural education extends to discussions of contemporary Indigenous life in Australia, including ongoing struggles for land rights, cultural preservation efforts, and the contributions of Aboriginal people to modern Australian society. The walking tour provides context for understanding how traditional ecological knowledge remains relevant to contemporary environmental challenges and how Indigenous perspectives contribute to current discussions about sustainability and land management. Urban expression. Buenos Aires street art revolution. The street art walking tour through Buenos Aires neighborhoods provides visitors with an immersive exploration of how public art serves as a vehicle for political expression, cultural identity, and urban transformation in contemporary Argentina. These guided expeditions through neighborhoods like Palermo and Villa Crespo reveal how murals, graffiti, and artistic installations reflect the city's complex social and political landscape. The tour guides, often artists themselves, or deeply embedded in Buenos Aires art communities, provide historical context about how street art evolved from political resistance during Argentina's military dictatorship into a recognized art form that attracts international attention. Participants learn about different artistic techniques, from traditional graffiti tagging to elaborate murals that require weeks of collaborative work by multiple artists. Each neighborhood visited during the tour represents different aspects of Buenos Aires street art culture. Palermo's commissioned murals reflect how street art has gained official recognition and commercial viability, while Villa Crespo's more experimental works demonstrate how artists continue to push boundaries and challenge conventional artistic and political norms. The tour reveals how different locations within the city provide artists with different audiences and different opportunities for expression. The political dimensions of Buenos Aires street art become apparent through guided analysis of specific works that address issues like economic inequality, government corruption, human rights, and cultural identity. Guides explain how certain images, symbols, and artistic techniques carry specific political meanings within Argentine context, while also discussing how street art serves as accessible public forum for debates that might be restricted in other venues. Revolutionary history. Boston's Freedom Trail experience. Boston's Freedom Trail offers visitors an immersive journey through the events and locations that shaped American independence, providing a walking tour through the very places where revolutionary ideas were debated, planned, and implemented. This carefully designed route through downtown Boston connects 16 historically significant sites that tell the story of how 13 British colonies evolved into an independent nation. The trail begins at Boston Common, America's oldest public park, where colonial residents gathered for public meetings, military drills, and public demonstrations that would eventually evolve into organized resistance against British rule. Costumed interpreters provide historical context about daily life in colonial Boston, explaining how economic grievances, political philosophy, and practical concerns about self-governance combined to create revolutionary sentiment. Each stop along the Freedom Trail reveals different aspects of the independence movement, from the intellectual foundations laid by figures like Samuel Adams and John Hancock to the practical organizing work done by groups like the Sons of Liberty. The tour visits locations where specific historical events occurred, including the site of the Boston Massacre and the Old South Meeting House, where the Boston Tea Party was planned, providing participants with tangible connections to events previously known only through textbooks. The architectural component of the Freedom Trail reveals how colonial and early American building styles reflected both practical considerations and cultural values of different historical periods. Participants examine examples of Georgian colonial architecture, federal period buildings, and early Republican structures, while learning how architectural choices reflected changing political relationships between America and Britain. Colonial legacy. Old San Juan's historical tapestry. The walking tour through Old San Juan provides visitors with comprehensive exploration of how Spanish colonial architecture, military history, and Caribbean cultural fusion have combined to create one of the Western Hemisphere's most significant historical districts. This guided journey through the walled city reveals layers of history spanning over 5 centuries of continuous habitation and cultural development. The tour begins with examination of the massive fortifications that protected San Juan from pirate attacks, foreign invasions, and military sieges for centuries. El Morro and San Cristobal fortresses serve as focal points for discussions about colonial military engineering, Spanish imperial strategy, and the strategic importance of Puerto Rico in Caribbean commerce and defense. Guides explain how these fortifications evolved over time to accommodate changing military technologies and threats. The architectural tour reveals how Spanish colonial building techniques adapted to Caribbean climate conditions while maintaining European aesthetic and functional traditions. Participants examine examples of how thick walls, interior courtyards, and strategic window placement created natural cooling systems that made European-style buildings comfortable in tropical conditions. The famous blue cobblestones that pave Old San Juan streets represent practical adaptations that provided ship ballast during the colonial period, while creating distinctive streetscapes that continue to define the district's character. The cultural component of the Old San Juan tour addresses the complex history of indigenous Taino peoples, Spanish colonization, African slavery, and subsequent waves of immigration that created contemporary Puerto Rican identity. Guides discuss how different cultural influences appear in architecture, cuisine, music, and religious practices, while also addressing contemporary issues related to Puerto Rico's political relationship with the United States. The transformative power of pedestrian discovery. These 12 walking tours represent far more than simple sightseeing expeditions. They demonstrate how the deliberate act of moving through space at human pace can transform casual tourists into engaged cultural participants, revealing stories and perspectives that remain invisible to faster forms of travel. Each tour offers evidence that the most meaningful travel experiences often emerge from slowing down rather than speeding up, from engaging deeply with specific places rather than attempting to cover vast distances. The diversity of these walking experiences illustrates how different cities and cultures have developed unique approaches to sharing their stories with visitors. From underground passages that preserve forgotten chapters of urban development to vibrant neighborhoods where art and activism converge, from culinary traditions that reflect centuries of cultural exchange to burial practices that reveal spiritual beliefs and practical adaptations. These tours provide windows into the complex forces that shape human communities. The guides who lead these walking tours serve as cultural translators, helping visitors understand not just what they are seeing, but why it matters within broader historical, social, and cultural contexts. Whether they are professional historians, community members sharing personal experiences, or artists explaining their creative practices, these guides transform simple observation into meaningful education and genuine cultural exchange. For travelers seeking experiences that extend beyond surface-level tourism, these walking tours provide opportunities to engage with destinations as complex, living places rather than collections of attractions to be photographed and checked off lists. They demonstrate that the most rewarding travel experiences often require nothing more sophisticated than comfortable shoes, open minds, and willingness to see familiar activities like walking through new eyes. In an increasingly connected but often superficial world, these pedestrian journeys offer something increasingly rare: the chance to move through places slowly enough to actually understand them. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. Please like and subscribe. Safe travels!